Hey everybody, welcome to our YouTube live session today. My name is Matt Pierce. I'm the Learning and Video Ambassador for TechSmith Corporation. Hopefully you're here to learn about how you can use things like video and images and other things that you might need if you're an educator in these crazy, weird times. A couple things I want to get through just real quick in case you're thinking about looking and learning more about creating video. I just want to mention that we've got our TechSmith Academy. It's a free online learning platform that you can go out. You just got to create an account. It's completely free. You can learn about scripting, storyboarding, lighting your environment, getting better audio, and we've got some awesome interviews with some really fantastic people who are creating videos for their profession. We also got some great interviews with people who are trainers, instructional designers, who have some really great advice if you're creating learning content. But let's get to the real reason we're here today is because we want to talk with educators. I'm happy to have with me Dan Spencer, local educator here in Michigan. Dan, welcome to our live stream today.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad you could join me. Dan and I have known each other, we'll clear the air. We've known each other for quite a long time. So I'm really grateful to be able to bring him into this. But the thing that I know about Dan, for all of you that listening, and we'll get Dan to introduce himself in a second, is I know of Dan because he's just an amazing person, amazing human, but he's also an educator, someone that, when my kids have education kinds of questions about they're thinking about becoming teachers, I like to point them to Dan because he is someone that I know will give them good, solid answers. So Dan, thanks for joining me. For those of you that haven't had a chance to, they don't know you, like who's Dan Spencer? Give us a little bit of your background, who you are. Why should we listen to you in essence?
Well, hey man, like I said, thanks for letting me be here. This is we go back a long ways, and so let's see. Education wise, this is my 19th year in education, which is kind of crazy. And I right now I teach high school science, so physics, chemistry, engineering. Before I've kind of been in a few different places, few different high schools. This is my 5th year at Western High School out in Jackson, Michigan. Before that, I was an educational technology consultant. I would work with all the teachers in Jackson and Hillsdale County, trying to help them use technology in their classrooms. And before that, I was at Michigan Center High School, and that's when I started getting to know about this thing called Jing and all of these screencasting options from TechSmith and stuff like that. And that's really where I really started getting into this and figuring out how to use this stuff to better connect with my kids.
And from a background perspective, I know you have been someone who's advocated the use of technology in the classrooms, the use of things like video and visuals. Before we get into maybe some advice for teachers and things like that, why has that been a path that you felt like, I don't know if it's been compelled to go down or you felt like that was something of value for yourself as a teacher to go down?
Well, I think the reason why I've seen the value in it is because it's just my personality. Like I really didn't like being the one guy up in front of all of my kids, all of my students, and them just being like this sea of faces. That stresses me out, weird as it is to say as a teacher. What I like is just making connections with my kids. I like knowing them one-on-one. I like being able to have more time with them individually. And what I found is that when I started using this stuff, it allowed a lot more of me to be able to go and work with my kids more one-on-one or in small groups. It freed me up to be able to work more with the kids in one-on-one than as just like an entire mob or an entire class.
So from a perspective though, our realities are shifting around us in terms of the way you interact with students nowadays. I mean, 5 years ago when we would have had this conversation, I totally understand, like in the classroom, you're freeing up some time, you're making yourself more available. But today, at least I know in the state of Michigan, our schools are now closed through the end of the school year. That's happening around the United States. It's probably happening in other countries. The realities changed. From your perspective, again, we'll get to some of the practical stuff here, but from a perspective, how important is it now that you have some of these techniques as a teacher to reach out to your students?
It's been huge just because like it all goes back to that idea of the relationships. Like, so just something that went on in our district, like a few weeks ago, as we were realizing what was happening, one of my colleagues, Elena Sharp, and I were talking about what are we going to do? And we thought, this really isn't going to work out very well if we just like tell the kids what we're going to do. We want to get their feedback on some things. So we did a Zoom call with a bunch of our high schoolers and just said, hey guys, this is kind of what's going on right now. What do you want this to look like if we do have to go with distance learning? And it was really interesting because one of the things that came up over and over again is that they were saying things pretty much to the effect of, we want our teachers. We want the person that was teaching me chemistry to keep teaching me chemistry. We don't want something from somewhere else. So I think what's made it so interesting is that this idea of relationships and connections with our students is even more important now because we're not right there. We're not able to be with them as a whole audience. We've really got to make sure that we're able to still connect with them because it's a lot different for them. It's a lot different for us as teachers. And if we don't have that relationship, it's really gonna be a lot more difficult.
Well, I love that, right? Like, I love that these kids were telling you that what they wanted was that interaction with the teachers, because I don't know, maybe I wasn't a bad student at all. I was, I did fairly well. I wasn't the top of my class, but I wasn't anywhere. I was, mid to high level, kind of middle range, right? Like I had to work hard, but I got there. But like, I would imagine that something like this, I would have been like, nothing. I don't want anything. Let's be done. Like, and I know there's probably kids out there like that, but it's so exciting to hear they want that connection and that opportunity, because I do have teachers that I remember as a student that I connected with, right? That I look forward to hearing and learning from. And I see this with my own kids, right? That one of the things, my daughter, she's a senior this year, we're getting ready to graduate, and I mean, she will graduate, but I mean, she even said, she obviously misses her friends, but she misses some of the interactions with the teachers, because outside of parents or adult figures, guardians, they were the ones encouraging her and helping her and strengthening her. And so, I mean, as much as that's maybe not about physics or chemistry or AP Bio or AP Lang or whatever it is, that seems like such an important piece of what they're getting from you guys as educators.
Right. Well, that's the way we teach physics. That's the way we teach chemistry or language or whatever that happens to be, is like, if you've got that connection with your students, you're going to be able to teach them a lot better than if it's just, here's these equations and go ahead and plug and chug and do all that, because that gets old really fast. And I think one of our struggles that we're having right now is that because there's such a wide difference in what kids have available to them in terms of resources, if we just throw a bunch of worksheets at them right now, it's not gonna go over very well.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that, like, because the worksheets are a lot about motivation, but I want to make sure that, so we've talked, obviously there's these challenges before you as an educator, your colleagues at the school, my kids' colleagues at a different school. I think a lot of educators are new to this, right? And they're all of a sudden, the reality has hit that they're not going back into the classroom for the rest of the school year. And so that can be frustrating. I can see a lot of the challenges. Let's try to give some hope here. And I do want to mention, if you're watching the stream, I glance over here because I got the comments, but if you're watching the stream and you got questions for Dan, go ahead and put them in the comments, right? Let us know what you want to know about so that we can ask Dan. But we're going to keep talking about some things, try to give some suggestions and whatnot, but feel free to let us know. So, okay. So Dan, is there hope for our educators at this point? If you're someone's watching this and they're like, my administration's telling me I got to do this. I've never done anything like this. Can they get up to speed fast enough?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think this is one of the really important things, because I think one of the hardest things for me when I first started doing this was I I have some perfectionist tendencies, and I tend to make it a little bit more difficult than it has to be. Like oh my gosh, that intro wasn't exactly perfect. I'm going to spend 45 minutes doing the first 15 seconds of things. That's not what your kids are looking for. They miss you. They miss your face. They miss your voice. All right. And that just goes back to the other things that we're talking about. So whatever you can do to give them you is going to be helpful. Like, I just think that in this day and age, we've got so many tools to be connected that it helps us or it helps make our job a lot easier, rather than having this faceless these faceless resources that we just email to kids. They can still have their teacher from their living room or from wherever they're working.
So Dan, I feel like some of this is, I just want to be like, hallelujah, right? Like, because that's something we've been talking a lot about lately on the live stream, is that you don't have to be perfect. Yeah. And I very much the same way. I actually had and I mentioned the director of marketing at TechSmith, because she gives me lots of really great feedback to help me be better. And one of the pieces of feedback is helping me to remember that where I'm at today is way up here, right? Like, I'm like, my bringing it down is like intermediate, whereas so many other people are basic in it. But it's okay to start and make a lot of mistakes. And how many mistakes? Right. And like, think about the time you're in the classroom. How many mistakes do you make in a given day when you're just lecturing and doing your normal stuff?
Oh my gosh, it's nonstop. I mean, it's a running joke that I tell my kids, hey, you're learning to speak, Spencer. Like, I've just said something that no one understands, but you're all nodding your heads because you get it. You know that when I fumbled with my words this way, this is what I really meant. And it's we can joke about it, but it's true. We make mistakes all the time. Kids know that we're human, and I think I think we're tougher on ourselves than our kids are.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get someone's probably going to roll their eyes when they have to watch a video and, Matt made a mistake in the video or whatever. But to me, that just makes it more human, makes it more real, more approachable. Yeah. So if you're feeling, educator feeling that pressure, first of all, mistakes are okay. But let's talk about some of the things that practicalities that they can do. Like, okay, so imagine that I'm a teacher, whatever subject, whatever grade, doesn't really matter. Maybe I'm even in higher ed. And all of a sudden this dictate has come out like, hey, we're not coming back to school, but we still need to try to teach something. Where do I start? Like, what's the first thing you would give me advice to do?
Okay, so I'm going to say start with your camera. All right? You've got this amazing tool here that can make things a lot easier, especially when it comes to that, keeping those connections. Your camera is going to help you a lot. So I would say the very first thing I do or the very first thing I was doing was just sending out little video clips of myself saying, hey guys, wondering how you're doing. Okay. And it's going to be in my front yard. It's going to be somewhere in my new normal that I'm saying, hey, this is a little picture into my life. I hope you're doing okay. Let me know how you're doing. All right. Just to keep those relationships going. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking that camera and I'm finding ways to connect what's around me with what I'm trying to teach. Ben Rhymes in Western Michigan is amazing at doing this, of going around. He has his camera everywhere. He's out on a walk and he sees something interesting and he whips out his camera and he's like, hey, I just noticed this. And it's 10, 15, 30 seconds of him finding this interesting thing, and he's making a hook to connect them with something that they're learning, and then he sends it out. He asks a question, he finishes with a question, and he sends it out. And he's using that as a way to show that there's connections to all of these things in the real world that make it back to the classroom. So I think that's where I start. Is I find ways to use the camera on my phone to keep the relationship, keep the connections going. but also to find little ways to send out, start sending out content. Another person, for those of you who are in the science field, and this is for all levels, Tom Kunzelman at Spring Arbor University has been doing these daily science demos from his kitchen table. And it's really cool because it's as simple of a setup as, hey, this is the camera on my phone, and I'm going to do something sciencey today.
Yeah, I mean, that makes really sense, right? Just work in the things around you. And it almost like it's habit building, right? Like get them used to you being this way. Now, I can imagine, though, if I'm playing that role, that first-time teacher, I'm really hesitant. And I'm going to say, like, oh, but I don't look good on camera. I'm worried about, like, all that stuff. I mean, a real concern. And I know for those who've been watching live stream, I just did a whole episode on getting comfortable on camera. But look, it's different coming from me than you as an educator. What would you say to those educators?
I'd say then don't put your face on it. Use your camera and you're doing a voiceover. They're hearing your voice. You're taking video of whatever it happens to be. They're not seeing you, but they're hearing you explain it. They're hearing the rise and fall of your voice. They're hearing all the things that make them comfortable when it comes to learning that topic area. And I think you'll see that there's a natural progression towards sharing. And the more you share, the more comfortable, the more you stop focusing on you and more on, hey, this is what I'm trying to share, and I just happen to be in the picture.
Right. Well, I mean, and in some way, I'm very biased in my opinion about this, but in some ways it's like, well, you don't hide when you're in front of the classroom. Like your teacher, the kids know what you look like. Just go with it, right?
Right.
I'm sure the first time, couple times I've ever been in front of a class teaching or training on something, it was harder, but eventually it's just like you just get used to it. So I love that advice, right? Like don't feel inclined that you have to be on camera because they still hear you, can still make that connection. Okay, so we can start with the cameras, which I think is great advice. That gets us probably for some subjects, probably actually you can do a lot. I imagine with like the subjects you teach, some of them are very visual, right? Like you're doing something with chemistry. Right. I think did you do one with like your bubbles and blowing up things?
Oh yeah. That was combustion day. So we were learning the chemistry of combustion, and you take some methane and you bubble it through soapy water and make sure you've got water on your hands, and you hold a pile of bubbles and light it on fire, and hopefully everybody still has their eyebrows when they're all done.
So I mean, for like a subject like that where you can do some of the things, like the sciences, some of them are like very visual. I imagine we've got language arts, literature, social science, maybe even math, some of these subjects that are maybe less inclined to like a camera video, showing your phone. What would you say, like, what's the next step? I can make these little like, hey, how you doing? Build the repertoire a little bit, but what's next?
So it still goes back to the camera, but what I start thinking about is taking pictures and then annotating those pictures. Like if I'm an ELA teacher, okay, and let's say we're reading Lord of the Flies or something like that.
Appropriate for these times.
Yes, exactly. Maybe it's something where you take you snap a picture of of a section or a passage, and you're highlighting things, or you're making little notes on that picture off to the side. Something that once again draws the attention to that to whatever it is you're trying to point out. It's something simple, but we see this on Twitter all the time in the education world, where somebody has just read something that's like, oh my gosh, I really love this. And they take a picture of it, they circle that, and they tweet that out. I've also seen some math teachers who are really good with, once again, finding, like, let's say you've got your trig stuff. You're working with right triangles. You're finding right triangles in nature, and you're snapping a picture of that, and then drawing some things and making a teachable moment out of that. So I would say there's whether it's video or whether it's pictures, you've got lots of opportunities to find things that can apply to whatever it is you're trying to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I love that, right? Like you've got most of us have access to a device that's going to give us the ability to create a lot of content pretty easily. And yeah, and I definitely, I think I'm trying to think of where, I think it was Wired magazine. Actually, this was a couple years ago. They had this thing about screenshots, and now TechSmith were obviously very invested in screenshots, but that was one of the examples too, right? Like a tweet, or some of these messenger services, you're limited on the amount of information you can convey, but a screenshot with words in it, you can put a whole page, right? If that's what you felt like was important or what's needed. So I love that idea of just being creative with the device that you have and making things and annotating. That seems like that would be a pretty powerful thing to do. Because I know it's easy to get yourself in trouble with things. Anything like guidelines, like I've learned from not maybe personal experience, maybe not, like things people shouldn't be doing that they should be avoiding with their camera. Obviously, there's the obvious. I'm not talking about like inappropriate, but
right. No, I know what you mean. I know. I mean, obviously not right now, but I like to do a lot of video and pictures from my classroom. I like to give a little window into what's going on. And sometimes that's really messy, but I always make sure, and I'm working with high school kids. I always make sure if I take a picture before I tweet that out or put it on Instagram or anything like that, I'm always asking the kids, hey, are you okay with me doing that? Or can I tag you in this or something like that? I don't want something to go out where, I don't have their permission to send that out. And there's times I have students whose parents have asked, hey, we don't want our child's photo or anything going out. And so I have to be aware of that kind of stuff. So when I'm with my kids, the biggest thing is I want to make sure that I'm only sharing what they're comfortable with me sharing.
No, that makes perfect sense. So probably less of a challenge now that we can't gather together.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Watch out for your own kids, right? Don't make sure they're okay with you being in your science experiment video.
Well, okay. So let me give you an example of my own kids. So Cruz is my youngest. Okay. And the other day we went out for a run, and all three of them did it. And afterwards we decided to go in the lake. Okay. We're going to ice our legs in the lake. So we were feeling pretty tough there. And I took a picture of the three, and I just set it out because I didn't think anything of it. Well, youngest one, he was mad. He was like, I didn't want you to take a picture of me. And I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I'm thinking here, all that I've talked about with digital citizenship and stuff like that, even though it was my kid, he didn't want that going out. So it was just a reminder that I needed to be careful about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, then always a good reminder too is watch your environment around you. Make sure you're showing stuff that is makes sense. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the camera. I want to move to. I mean, obviously, probably. I'm guessing most teachers have something like a laptop or a computer or a device that's going to allow them even more content creation access. And being TechSmith, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Camtasia and Snagit. But I think the reality is I want to talk about screen capture, screen video, and I'm sure it's some of the similar stuff. But I know you've done a lot of videos and kind of using the screen, like Camtasia and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So if we're continuing to kind of down our path of this helping these teachers to level up, it feels like, going from just making quick one-off unedited videos or very lightly edited videos to something that's a little bit more. But what are some of the options that you would recommend? I mean, do you recommend making screencast videos or just recording PowerPoint presentations or really? And you're not going to hurt my feelings if you say, no, that's a terrible idea, but, little hurt my feelings.
So, no. I think, in term, in my learning curve, before I even knew about Camtasia, I was using Jing, and just that very basic, 5 minutes, where you can capture what's going on your screen. Now, nowadays, what you've got is Snagit, and being able to not just take very simple video of what's happening on your computer screen, but you can also take those still pictures and annotate those. That I use that quite a bit. I'm thinking of like annotated pictures, um, especially now with me being a science teacher. There are certain things, like if it comes to wanting to get my kids to do some experiments at home. Um, I have to be very explicit about what I want them to do. So sometimes it's going to be, I'm going to take a picture and then I'm going to have some arrows like pointing out certain things. I might have some text in there. I might have some things to highlight in that picture where I really want them to be aware of that certain thing. Um, and so that's been one of the things that I've used Snagit for the most, is just to be able to capture something, to be able to highlight something that I want them to notice, like whether it's lab equipment or something in a demonstration that I've done where I want them to, that if I didn't point it out, they might miss it.
Right.
That's I just want to highlight that, and I've got some really easy ways to do that with using Snagit.
No, that's awesome. And I just want to mention, so if we have any educators that are with us today, we do have an offer right now at TechSmith through the end of June. You can get Snagit. It kind of cuts off at the end of June, but you can get Snagit now through the end of June for free. You don't get to keep it past end of June, but anyone can go download that. So it is available. Like, so if anyone's thinking like, oh, I don't have access to that, but I want to try what Dan's talking about, just make sure everyone's aware that that's available to them. Just go to techsmith.com and search. I think you can just search for like COVID. That will bring it up, or pre-Snagit COVID. But we just want to make sure we know this is a difficult time. People are making a lot of transitions in business and schools that they weren't necessarily thinking about or prepared for, because who could prepare for everything that we have to be prepared for? But we have an option there, along with a video review as well. So if you need ways for students to comment on the videos and have conversations, that's available for folks as well too. So no, but Dan, I think that makes a lot of sense, that it's just about highlighting information, right? Calling out the steps of things that you want them to do, because I think, especially probably, I imagine with younger students, maybe less at the advanced kind of junior, senior level, but it feels like a big part of education is teaching them to learn. Like
yes,
they don't know yet.
Big
They
time.
don't know how to figure this out. Like we just assume like, oh, you should know how to do this or figure out how to go through the steps. But I found with my own kids, no, like I gotta prime them, right? I gotta get them ready to go through it.
No, I mean that's exactly the case, is that there's so much more independence now. It scares some parents. But for kids, one of the issues that we're running into is, whereas before, if they had something that came up and they had a question, they could ask it right then and there. All right. They don't necessarily have that right now. So I've got to figure out ways as a teacher to help walk them through what they need help with. I've almost got to think ahead of some things and say, hey, where might they be running into problems? And do as much as I can to give them content, to give them information that will help get ahead of those questions.
So Dan, I'm going to turn to our comments real quick. I just realized that the comments on my page weren't updating, so I refreshed it, and I see some stuff that not to ignore anybody, but I would just read them. There's not so much questions; it's just things I think it would be good for you to hear. Bledsoe Zone, says it gives my students permissions to make mistakes themselves when they turn things in, and obviously in reference to when we were talking about mistakes. So I think that's
big time.
I think we get so caught up in this perfection idea, like, oh, you got to get an A, you got to get 100%. But I don't learn from being perfect. I learn from messing up, frankly.
Exactly.
How many times I think we were talking before we went live that I said I think I've done, how many of these live streams I just keep forgetting to mute? It's only because I made that mistake that I've learned. Hopefully. Jack Henney says, thank you, Dan, for inspiring me to make my own video. I was so concerned about making sure my bookshelf was very organized before I tried it, and I'm glad to hear you're a perfectionist because I think it looks like it cuts off. I can't see the rest of it. But anyways, so.
Hey, no problem, Jack.
So guys,
Glad to help.
if anyone else is in the comments, it looks like my comment feed is refreshing. So please let us know if you got questions, comments, thoughts. Even if you got ideas you want to share with the community, we'd love to hear from you what you're doing if you're an educator, even if you're not an educator, because frankly, we all need some help and lift at this time. Okay, Dan, so we've talked about a number of other things. We've been kind of going through this progression, right? Getting harder and harder, more complicated stuff. Anything else in your tool belt that you would say pull out at this time that you would like? I know you mentioned you're working with your administration, you're working with probably other faculty in your school, even though you know as a teacher. What else are you telling them to do? Like, how else are you coaching and guiding them at this time?
So one of the interesting things that we're running into is because, like, in my high school, we've got 900 kids in our grades 9 through 12. Um, we've got a wide variety of kids that have lots of access to lots of things, and the other end of the spectrum. So, and of course, everything in between. So we're trying to figure out how to make it equitable to everybody. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to do is find ways where kids can show that they understand in several different ways. All right. It doesn't have to be just one way, and the only way you can do that is if you have access to the internet. So we've been trying to figure out, as I've been talking with my administrators, and they've been really supportive of this, is how do we help kids demonstrate they understand in ways that aren't just like paper and pencil. All right. And that's been really cool, because a lot of the same things that we've been talking about as teachers, students can use that to show what they understand. Students can whip out their phone and take a picture of things. Students can annotate a picture. Students can make a quick video explaining things. And a lot of the same issues that they have, or we have, they have. So we can kind of help walk them through that. And it's been fun to show them how to be those content creators themselves, and to really be able to say, you know what, if I'm gonna work on this learning target for let's say chemistry, okay, how can I show that I really get it? And I'll tell you, kids will amaze you what they think up, and when they have some freedom and when they have the autonomy to be able to do it, they'll come up with some really interesting things that'll just amaze us.
Yeah, I love the kind of the flipping the use of the technology. It's not just, we're not just talking about we have to get teachers to get their message out, but it's also the kids have to be able to show or demonstrate or whatever you're asking them to do that the knowledge is being acquired. And hopefully that's allowing them to progress. So I love that. And I think you're right. I know, my kids are really fun. And like, I know right now my less related to like, probably school stuff, but she's in the music and she's in the choirs and stuff like that. And so, I mean, she's like, I'm going to write a musical, like she's expressing herself.
What?
And
isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
You think about that. And okay, so I'm about to nerd out right now.
Let's do it.
Just to warn you. But I love this. I love this example of when kids all of a sudden have the ability to learn what they want to learn or focus on what they want to focus. Now, I know your daughter, all right? She's fantastic. She has great parents.
Well, thank you.
But she's also been, that's the performing arts is a gift that she has. All right. And I think so often kids we tell them what they need to learn. Well, what happens when all of a sudden they have the chance to learn something that they really want to do? Like I'll tell you, if I think about in my physics class, one of the things I'm mourning that we don't get to teach right now is sound waves. Like, because we were getting ready, we were gearing up towards that. Man, what if there was a way that somebody like your daughter was able to use that talent that she has for performing and to find ways to tie in other things that that like the science of voice or other things. There's it's just I love it when kids get excited about that. And then now your daughter is wonderful because she comes up with that on their own. A lot of kids would struggle, but I think this is a fantastic opportunity that we have to right now to act as coaches with our kids and be able to tie in some things, real world examples or applications of what's happening in our classroom, and use that for our advantage.
So you actually bring in a whole nother audience here, right? That teachers, you as a teacher is probably dealing with. I mean, we got the students, we got the teacher, but then we've got, I mean, we'll set aside administration, but parents, right? Like, because as a teacher, this technology isn't probably just good for student teacher stuff. It's like you've got to connect with parents on a whole different level too, right? Because I haven't been the teacher in the classroom. I haven't had to teach my kids math, and now all of a sudden I'm being asked to help out. And frankly, I don't know. I'm terrible at math.
so it's, man, it's. I mean, we know this is a very uncomfortable situation for everybody right now, and I really feel for the parents that are out right now because there's so many concerns going on, and one of those concerns happens to be keeping their children engaged, keeping them working on things, keeping them learning. And what do you do when you get to that point where you don't know how to help? Like, for example, I consider myself kind of a pretty smart person. I cannot figure out for the life of me how to help my 9-year-old with his math. Like, because we have had so many breakdowns at the kitchen table of, no, Dad, that's not how we do it in our class. And I'm like, what's wrong with carrying the one when we're doing addition? But it's just, there's a frustration there because Cruz is used to the way his teacher explains it. There's a frustration for me because I can work just fine with high school students, but I'm really struggling with trying to figure out how to do this with a 9-year-old. And as a parent, I think, man, anything that I can get from those teachers is a godsend. It's like, just send it my way, because I don't want to be that parent who's saying, you just do it because that's why you do it. I want to be able to be working with that teacher and helping my son have a good experience with this. But I really need to team up with the teacher rather than just try to do it all on my own.
Which I'm sure is the same, like you as a teacher. If I was, one of your students' parents, like I don't know chemistry, physics, engineering. And so, I mean, I can definitely see where that would be so valuable. I think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong here, but I think a lot of the things we just talked about throughout the whole previous part of this episode, the just get on camera, just make a video, connect things. Like, I think those all still apply for parents, right? Like, and maybe even, I mean, it's obviously very different, right? Because as students or as parents, my interaction with you as a teacher may have been nothing to maybe frequent because, my kid was either a rock star or probably struggling. But like, it seems like that dynamic is going to have to change a little bit because I can't teach what you're teaching. I don't know how. And my guess is, so any advice for your fellow teachers in that sense? Because, I know as a parent, I'm probably not a teacher's favorite person sometimes because I'm a parent and I've got my own vested interest in my student, my kid or whatever.
Yeah. And that's where something we need to realize we're all on the same team here. It is hard. We're all out of our comfort zones on this, but I think that's where that whole idea of communication and just being human is so important. Like one of the things that I've done in the past with my students is just making my own videos and kind of walking through how to do things. And I'll have parents that will come up to me in parent teacher conference and said, thank you so much for having this. I was able to sit down with my son or my daughter and see how it's done. And of course, they also use other things that people out there. There's a lot of people out there that are making some really high quality content that we can use to supplement what's going on. But it's so nice to be able to get an email from a parent that says, hey, I'm struggling to explain this. And I then am either able to take a video that I've already created or make one on the spot to explain that, send that link off, and they're, oh my gosh, thank you. That makes so much more sense than just trying to read through it step by step on just on a piece of paper.
Yeah, for sure. Because I know I'm well read enough that I know when I read stuff and it doesn't make sense, right? And sometimes,
Yeah.
the math, the sciences, it's if I'm just not experienced with it. I probably knew it at one point. I've forgotten everything because I just don't use it. Dan, so I want to get one more kind of practical idea out there that I'm feeling like if I was in a teacher situation, this is like knowing what I know about creating content. I would love to recommend to teachers, like, open up PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You put in some blank slides.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have access to something, you can either type, or if you have a tablet device that you could write, you could do that too. But then just write and draw on the PowerPoint slide and record that, right? Like,
Yes.
It's like the old school when we used to have the acetate sheets that you'd write on the projector,
Yep.
the overhead projector, and you're like, taking notes. Actually, in grad school, I had a professor. That's the only way he would teach.
Uh-huh.
And like we had everything, all the technology, but I feel like just recording something like that, just doing it doesn't feel like much of a stretch. I don't have to worry about the camera.
Right.
I can just talk like I normally do.
Yep.
And maybe I'm already doing that kind of thing, writing down notes, but I feel like that's probably as easy as anything.
Exactly. Because there's so many people out there that are making their living off of creating these really high quality resources. That's their thing. Okay. But for us, we're just trying to help give the information in a way that our kids can understand it. And I think that was a perfect example that you gave of just a very simple way to teach a lesson or teach a concept, record it, and then be able to send that, whether it's students or parents, send that to them, and have them be able to see that on their own timeline.
So let me ask you this, because you kind of mentioned this earlier and alluded to it, but I want to be really specific. So I have a feeling that there's somebody that's going to watch this and feel like, wow, I'm going to do a whole hour-long class, and I'm going to record that hour, and I'm going to make the kids watch that. Any feeling? I know we have data about people watching videos, instructional videos, and informational videos, but I want to get your sense as a teacher, like, how long should these videos be for your students or for parents, do you think?
I say chunk it. The smaller of the bite you can give them, the better. When I was first doing this, I once made a 45-minute video review, and there was anarchy in the classroom the next day. They were just, it was hard just because it's hard to keep attention for that long. But what I found in the future when I started doing that kind of stuff is, well, rather than 45 minutes, start doing it in 5-minute chunks related to one topic, maybe 10, 12 minutes at the most, but I would much rather have 5 to 8 minutes explaining a concept. And what I found, in fact, one of the things that I've done for like labs is it's still step by step, but step one is watch this video. Okay. And then these are the things that I need you to do. Once you're done with that, then watch this video clip and do these things, and just kind of lead them through that one step at a time rather than trying to do the entire thing. It's
makes sense. So there's one or two questions or comments I'm going to get to here, but something else that came up to mind is, okay, so we've talked a lot about the creation process, But the inevitable kind of fear is, I've made this, now what do I do with it? A video does not work through email very well because they're so usually too big.
Right.
And I know every school's got different systems, setups, but like, again, if I'm a brand new person, like, how do I manage that technology hurdle? To like, where can I share? How can I share this stuff easily so I can make sure that most of my students will be able to get to it? Like, do you have recommendations?
So, like, for example, when I was sending you some examples of stuff that I had done today, one of those was a video to my track team, my distance kids, because I'm sending them out workouts to do, and I had uploaded that to YouTube. I really didn't feel like making it public for the entire world to see, so I just put I'm trying to think of what the setting is.
Unlisted.
It's the middle one. Unlisted, where if you have the link, you'll be able to get that. So that was a nice, easy way to kind of get that out without making it available for the whole world. I know one of the things that I've done quite a bit is I've used Google Drive, and I've uploaded videos there and sent that link to students rather than the entire video itself, the MP4. Dropbox is an option. There's lots of cloud hosting services out there that are both free and paid that will let you kind of store your content there.
Yeah, no, I think it's important, right? Because the challenge being that you got to people need access, and email is not meant for videos. It's not meant for large images and annotated documents or whatever. But no, I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm thinking through, like, okay, all the hurdles that these teachers are going to have, and hopefully administration organizations thought through it, but chances are you might be flying solo for a little bit just to make it work.
Right. And as you talk about that, some other things come to mind. There's some learning management systems out there that people use. For those of us who have done online classes in college and stuff like that, it was probably Blackboard. So that's not available for just anybody. But you have things like Schoology. That's what we use. We have things like Google Classroom. They all have free versions of those. And the nice thing about that is then you can have your content in one place. And rather than like sending out, whenever somebody has a question about something, sending them out that link, you can say, hey, go to our Google Classroom, or go to Schoology, or go to wherever it is we have all of our stuff. I know a lot of teachers use some website makers like Weebly to make things. It changes all the time, and that's okay. But they've got a central place for all that content that people, as long as they have internet connections, are able to get to.
Yeah, and my guess, and hopefully every school has a Dan Spencer type in their school. Someone who's been thinking about this.
We're a dime a dozen, man. We're all over the place.
Well, I don't know about that, but like, because I imagine that people are going to have questions, and what we can address in an hour-long segment might only scratch the surface. And then when you get tool questions, how do I do this? How would I annotate this picture I did on my phone? What's the best way to do that? But Dan, I really appreciate you taking time to spend with me. We're going to see if any more comments come in. I'm going to read this next one. I've been trying to read it on the sly as we've been talking, and I'm not quite sure I understand, but maybe there's something here we can talk about. Hamdi says, hello, most students watch YouTube on phones, so I can't put much information about the lesson or the point I'm explaining on screen for educational videos. Then they go on to say, I feel like I have to satisfy phone watcher and PC watchers along the video of the lesson. It's all about the format of the video and the size of the characters and the images. So, I mean, okay, so this is an issue, right? Like the thinking, and maybe this is a little bit more complex, but thinking about consumption, right? If I'm a student, and I'm watching on a device like I gotta find my camera like this versus a computer. Do you put much thought into kind of the way you design and develop? So for those audiences, or is it kind of like would you just say just get started and work it out as you go?
Well, I yes and no. Okay, because we're talking presentation zen here. We're talking like just how do you put things in a way that's easily absorbed. So I think about my students because I mean they've always got their phone right there. And so I have to think, okay, if I just put a bunch of text and I'm just reading that text, that's it's going to be really hard to read it on that screen. And plus they're not going to get much out of that. Okay, so what is like one picture or one diagram or one main idea that I can have for each segment of that? So if I'm doing, like, let's say I have several problems that I'm working through, I'm not going to put all of those on the same page because it's going to make this, they're going to look way too small on the screen. I'm going to go and I'm going to kind of just focus on one of those at a time and make it as easy to see as possible on that computer screen, or on that cell phone screen, because I know if it shows up well there, it's going to show up well on the iPad or on the monitor or whatever that happens to be. But no, I found that I put a lot of thought into where things are going to be. Like, for example, as I got more and more comfortable with screencasting and using Camtasia, I really love to have the little picture of me in the, like, if I'm working through something on my Google Slides, I would need to make sure that as I created those slides that I had some white space available in a certain corner where my picture would show up and it wouldn't be in front of anything that's important on the screen. So those are just things that you get used to as you do it. They're not deal breakers, but it's just one of those things that as you become more comfortable with it and more confident in it, you find ways to refine it. And that's where it gets fun. And I love that part. It's just there's something artistic about making it, and it's just, for me, it's enjoyable.
So if I can throw in my 2 cents, if I was a teacher today and I had to make a decision about what I'm going to do, I would cater towards the mobile device, make it optimized for that, because the PC user is so much more flexible, right? Like, designed for, like, now the thing is they can do this, right? So you can have a horizontal design for mobile.
Yeah.
But that works well on the PC. I mean,
right.
Worst case scenario, you do it like vertical, and it still works on the PC, right? So I would say,
right.
Hamdi, just design for the most likely use case, which it sounds like it's going to be phone. And the other thing is, you may have to teach them to pinch and zoom in or whatever, or use functions like zoom and pan in Camtasia to focus and make it big. So that's the thing that's going to be in the frame at the time that you're talking about it. So I don't think it's it doesn't sound like it's an insurmountable problem. It's just being thoughtful will make a difference. And for everyone listening who said, I don't understand a word Matt just said, don't worry about it. Just start making stuff. Like
it comes with time.
Yep. My mantra for these live broadcasts has been, look, let's get 1% better every time we do something. Make one video, get 1%. Just keep getting better and we'll be fine. And Dan, I hope you agree with me that I think teachers are in the same boat. It's like every time you teach a lesson, if you could just make it a little bit better the next time, unless it was really bad, but just keep improving and you'll be fine. Your students will be fine. They'll get what they need and you'll learn what is really the ultimate kind of presentation or display of that material.
Hey, Matt, can I know we're running short on time and stuff, but can I add one thing to that?
Please.
There's been many times when I have done a lesson that I know I'm going to screencast or just turn into video at some point, where I've done it with the mindset of, I know the first time I do it, it doesn't go very well. So I'm going to use my classes as like preparation. So like first hour, I'm going to do this live with them, get comfortable with it, see what works, see what doesn't. Second hour, I might do it again, get a little bit better. And then during my prep period, I go and I make it so that next year I have it and it's in video form, and kind of planning for the future, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's that idea of just 1% better every time, just finding ways to get more and more comfortable with the material and figuring out what works for you.
That's awesome advice, and I guess now if you're not in class, having those opportunities to prepare, you run through it a couple times, or maybe send something out and refine it for the next time. Like, I think the other thing I would just say from my experience working with teachers is that the things that you're creating are not precious, right? Like they don't sit on a golden pedestal of
Yep.
all information, because frankly, in a year or two, you're going to know something better, or 6 months even, you might know how to do it better, or even something's changed, believe it or not. Information knowledge changes. So I would say, yeah, you
Very
know that
true.
you're going to have to recreate it. Well, Dan, as you mentioned, we are pressing up on time. I'm not seeing any other information, like questions or comments coming through, which is fine. Hamdi does say thanks a lot for the advice, so you are welcome.
Welcome.
Dan, as we're closing out here, any last advice, words of wisdom that you would give to all your fellow colleagues out there who are now on this kind of new frontier of trying to do this massive educate from home experience? Things
Uh-huh.
that anything you would want to say to your fellow teachers and administrators?
Matt, I think I would just repeat what we talked about before is your kids miss you. All right. There is something that is missing from their lives right now, and you have a small piece in that. So just have some confidence that know that as you are able to send things out, whether they are perfect or not, um, that you are giving some normalcy to them. You are providing something that gives them a little bit of stability, and that is precious right now. So you are much more important than you think.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you, Dan. I want to thank Dan Spencer for joining me today. We're going to look at our schedule of things, and as things progress, you've got lessons to learn. Maybe we'll bring you back on. We can talk some more. I'll ask you live, because then they have to say yes. If you have a few links of examples you'd like to share, we can put those in the YouTube description, just to give
Definitely.
some people some ideas. We didn't know how, everyone watching, we didn't know how it would work trying to share a YouTube video through this medium. So we'll put a couple example from Dan in below, so you can kind of see what we've been talking about in terms of using video and some stuff. I think that would be really helpful. And just as we kind of go out here, I want to just re-mention, if you missed in the very beginning, is that we do have an online learning platform for people to go out and learn some of these skills. Now, we were not thinking about the very basic core educator, but there's some lessons there that might be very valuable things if you're trying to up your game. You're at that point where you want to learn about adding a little light, or you're trying to get audio and you're like, man, it doesn't sound good. We've got a few lessons on the TechSmith Academy. It's completely free. There's also some great resources there that you can download, like script templates or storyboard templates that might help you in your planning process. And if you're not an educator and you're still watching this and